प्रसार भारती अभिलेखागार की प्रस्तुति सदाबहार सुनहरे दौर का अनमोल खजाना।
On the 26th day of January 1950, we, the people of India, enacted and gave to ourselves a constitution with the avowed objective of securing for our people justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. This document was fashioned with a dream to create a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic Republic of India. Almost 40 years down the road, we are in a position to re-examine this document, to do introspection on the Constitution in the light of concrete and actual experiences. What are the major achievements and failings of our Constitution? If we were to draw up a balance sheet of the Constitution, what would that look like?
During these years, 40 years, most of the dreams have become successful. And when the people got the democracy in really, and there have been 8 elections to Lok Sabha and the assemblies, and we find that people have also given a good choice of the representatives, and the democracy has been functioning well. But some of the main dreams have not come true. For example, we decided that there should be compulsory education for all children up to the age of 14. That has not come possible up to this time. Secondly, we wanted a common civil code for all the citizens of India. That has also not been possible up to this time.
I feel the biggest achievement of our constitution is that it has given me a right of self-determination. The determination to be governed by a government of my choice. The democratic process. I do not have to be guided by a monarch. I can choose anybody I feel like who's contesting. And that I feel is the biggest achievement of the Indian Constitution. And with that, the fact that we are discussing this is again a very, very big achievement. The right to freedom of speech. I can criticize, I can talk. I can express my views as freely as I want. And I think that's great.
Well, the Constitution has served us very well in many ways, and it is now necessary to see what parts of the Constitution need to be examined again. But I think that it's primarily, we have to examine our own conduct in the light of the specific provisions of the Constitution, rather than just jump and say this Constitution needs to be changed or replaced, or parliamentary system is to be replaced by presidential system. That instead of going so far ahead, we should first see what is the specific problem we have and what is the specific part of the Constitution which has encouraged that problem. After identifying that, we should see what is the minimal change that we can make in that part of the Constitution to help us overcome that specific problem.
What would you identify as the major ailment in the Constitution?
Well, the major difficulty is that we are not able to get a better type into our public life. So I would judge, among the first criteria that I would use for judging any alternative proposals for constitutional reform would be, does this new structure which is proposed, is it going to help us get a better type into public life or not? So the one part of the Constitution which I think needs to be looked at, and even more than that, other laws which relate to elections, as the whole question of electoral reform.
We have a set of fundamental rights. That again is an achievement of the Indian Constitution. They have given us certain rights, certain freedoms. These freedoms pertain to protections of an individual. They protect my individuality. But, let's talk about illegal detention. Now, according to the Constitution, I cannot be illegally detained, and these fundamental rights protect them. मैं जैसे बतलाता हूँ, देखो, एक आदमी को आपने 1 महीने के लिए डिटेन करा हुआ है, उसने रिट मूव करी एंड ही इज रिलीज्ड. बट वो जो 1 महीने की इलीगल डिटेंशन थी, नाउ आर वी गोइंग टू फिक्स अप द रिस्पांसिबिलिटीज ऑन समबडी? According to the Constitution, there is no specific provision. मैं क्या private complaint file करूँगा? It says civil suit, I'll file a criminal suit. Now these are things which are so time consuming. And again, money involvement is there, that they're really not very effective measures.
We speak of our fundamental rights with unflinching conviction. However, any constitution which gives us rights enjoins upon us, nay binds us to a certain set of duties.
Article 51A of the Constitution, ever since it's been introduced, provides for what's called fundamental duties in the Constitution. They're quite wide and cover a broad spectrum. In fact, it's almost an umbrella of duties. And according to me personally, it is enforceable, because unlike in the chapter of directives, principles of state policy, where there's a specific prohibition regarding enforceability in court, 51A does not have any such provision. Who's to bail the cat? Is the state going to enforce it, or is the court going to enforce it? The state feels it's doing its duty of using the law and order machinery and the administrative machinery, and the people are not satisfied generally. Will the court interfere? That is a major issue.
I would urge that the duties are not to be looked for within the Constitution. The duties are, we have to see what is it necessary for me to do to enable the constitutional structure to work in this form or in a slightly modified form. Now, the first duty I think which we have to recognize is that everybody must agree to live by some rules at least. See, there is no way in which a structure can be defined which would work, and which would work in spite of each of us disobeying all the rules of the game. There is no way in which you can mark the markers on the road. There is no way in which you can design a car or design the road itself that the traffic would flow if each of us insists, no, I will drive the car wherever I want to drive it. So we must abide by some rules. Second, I think, is the duty to recognize a limitation on our demands, that in a society, certainly a poor society like ours, but in any society, it is not possible for us to get everything we want all the time for each of us. We will win some things, we will lose some things. So the premise that no, I will bring this system to a halt if I don't get everything, and if I don't get it now, we must give that up.
It is often contended that our constitution does not suffer from any lacuna. What is at fault is the implementation, administration, and the interpretation of the constitution. Therefore, all the blame is placed squarely at the doorstep of politicians, administrators, and the judiciary.
While we created this constitution and made provisions for certain fundamental rights, the entire machinery of governance and the premises on which it is based is such that it allows for absolutely no accountability to the people. It's highly centralized, very authoritarian, vests tremendous arbitrary powers at every level of the government machinery, from the lowest functionary to the highest.
I don't think it is too much of bureaucracy. I think it is lack of commitment to the people in the bureaucracy or whoever is entrusted with it. You see, here I would say something which may not be all that novel for you. You see, you have the private sector, you have the public sector and the government. Public sector and government more or less the same thing. But I would say education and health, they belong to an altogether new sector, which I would call the service sector. Now, if the service sector also functions like the government sector or the public sector, then all the emphasis is on compliance with rules. This was to be done in this way, it has not been done in that way. Whereas when you have the service sector, the focus is on the service sector, the focus is then on service. And there may be somebody who, for example, may violate rules, or if not actually violate them, take a shortcut, but the desire is to serve. In my opinion, this kind of a psychology deserves to be created, and it is our inability to distinction between the rest of the governmental functioning and the service sector which is creating some of these problems.
It is also said that the constitution and the government have created too many public servants but very little public welfare.
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Why has that happened?
A number of things. Number one, I said lack of commitment. Number two, pressure from those who stand to benefit by this kind of thing. You see, what is happening now is, or has been happening for the last 20, 30 years is, that people who get into service begin to generate a momentum of their own. So they want this, they want that, they want that. And we do not have what is called accountability. And in fact, one of the crucial weaknesses in education is lack of accountability. This is something so fundamental to the absence of performance that one cannot but refer to it and in fact work on it and devise something, some kind of a strategy so that we have better accountability. You see, this is my point. Let us say now a bus service is very important, I have no doubt, because the city just cannot function without a bus. But what happens is, a bus service is partly a service, but partly something else. Now, if we think only about the welfare of the employees, we certainly are doing the right thing. But that is not the objective of the bus service. The objective of the bus service is to provide efficient bus service. So, everything else is subsidiary to that. And that is why I say that we must develop this concept of a service sector. Give it a different set of rules and regulations, give it a different set of incentives and disincentives, and create a kind of culture where the emphasis is on service and not on this rule or that rule.
It is not so much, as I say, a failing of the Constitution as of people who have to work the Constitution. They have to be more dynamic, more progressive, more forward-looking, and more look around the world and see the dangers that confront them if they don't adapt themselves by appropriate changes in their laws, in their outlooks, in their culture, by means of education to the needs of the day.
The first thing is, what can we do mainly to get over the failing? I think of putting ourselves out on public issues.
But is there something in the constitution that can be installed which can catalyze this process?
No, I don't think so. It is the citizen who will have to work and put himself out on public issues. Constitutions, yes, electoral reforms and other things will help. But the first thing is, will we put ourselves out on that thing or not?
In spite of a secular and democratic constitution, ugly forces of religious fundamentalism and regionalism are rearing their head. India continues to groan under a primitive, feudal and caste-based division of society. What has the impact of the constitution been on sensitive sections of society, namely minorities, women, labor, and the economically depressed and socially backward classes?
That is precisely the reason why some people say that the pace of progress has not been fast enough, and that is why they would like to see a more rapid pace of progress, and that is why they would like to strengthen the hands of the power which can bring about these changes. They feel that these changes are very essential in order to keep integrity, in order to enforce the provisions relating to justice, liberty, equality, because they feel that these backward oppressed classes have not had their due share.
As far as the Constitution is concerned, I don't think there is much room for improvement. One can more or less act within those parameters and things will work. But then it is for you to see how far is the lot of the women better. It is certainly better. I am not saying it is not better, but then I personally think that there is a good deal that requires to be done there. And as far as the minorities are concerned, well, I think the situation today is a little more tense than it used to be some years ago. It is because we are not grappling with the problems of communalism at the grassroots level.
With women, you have to go a step further and begin with the family, because what one sees from my experience in dealing with women's issues in the last decade or so, I would say the worst of violations come from within the family. You have provisions for equality of opportunity in employment, no discrimination in education. All these are constitutional guarantees of freedom of movement, freedom of speech and expression. But if your family does not want you to be educated, how do you make use of that? From childhood they deny you schooling, or they give you some amount of schooling enough for the marriage market purposes, don't equip you with any skills at all, or restrict your mobility. यहाँ नहीं जाना, वहाँ नहीं जाना, इससे बात नहीं करनी, उससे बात नहीं करनी, ये नहीं करना, वो नहीं करना, काम करने देना है कि नहीं, नौकरी करनी है कि नहीं, करनी है तो कौन सी करनी है. These various don'ts that are placed on women. I think the primary violation of these rights, of women's fundamental rights, all the rights enshrined by the Constitution, comes from within the family. Even freedom of speech and expression. No? You're not supposed to, if you're being beaten by your husband or maltreated by your own family, you're not even supposed to talk about it. These are unmentionable. So the constitutional right of freedom of speech and expression doesn't make any sense. Or freedom of mobility. If your family doesn't allow you to step out, to have that constitutional guarantee that any citizen of India can be anywhere, anytime, doesn't really make sense. And I think this has had the fact of this overwhelming influence and power that family has in India. Now, if it turns to be supportive, it can be very good and comfortable. But if it denies you that support, you have nowhere else to go. And I think that is the problem that most women face.
I feel that the Constitution has done something, especially for the women of a country, in the sense they have granted equal rights to the women. And I think it has been good, it has achieved something. Because I feel in today's time, if I go, since I'm working and I know that whatever job I take up, I know that I'll get the same salary as the man who will take up the same kind of job. It has been achieved, I mean, because the Constitution grants equal rights to women. Even otherwise, I think India is one of the few countries which has this kind of thing. And the Parliament has taken out an act which says that every male or a female child has equal right to the inheritance of the father. That's because the Parliament feels that the Constitution has given the rights to the Parliament. So definitely achievements. People do criticize that women are still inferior in the country and they're still suppressed, are suppressed lot. What I feel is not the failure as such. It's not the failure of the Constitution. A legal piece of paper cannot change society, cannot change people. It's the people themselves who have to change, and the women who themselves have to come out and ask for their rights. Because the right is there for them to grab, to take.
Switching streams now, Mr. Choi, let us talk about the very disturbing phenomenon of religious fundamentalism vis-a-vis the Constitution.
Well, fundamentalism has come into our politics now really because of the character of politics rather than the character of the Constitution. The first fact is that our politics has been the politics of grievance mongering. I find a grievance among some followers, I shout about it and thereby acquire a following. After a little while, I go looking for such grievances. Then I invent such grievances as I must. And in the end, somebody starts discovering grievances of caste groups, of trade unions, of economic groups. Somebody starts doing it of religious groups. And it is in the advocacy of grievances, of grievance mongering of religious groups that all this fundamentalism is to be looked at. So it's the character of politics. The second feature of politics that has brought this about is that a large number of political leaders for short-term advantage have made truck with leaders who wielded influence among religious groups. Second principle I think we should look at is never to allow to a religious organization or body a latitude which we would not allow to a non-religious body or organization. I'll give you an example that in the company law, the senior management of the company or the proprietors of the company are criminally and personally liable for any frauds or crimes committed by their company. Why don't we have this for religious organizations? if I am the head of a temple or a masjid or a gurdwara, and you suddenly discover that I have misused the funds or misappropriated the resources or allowed my premises to be misused, why should you not hold me responsible for it? The third principle I would urge very strongly is that never to allow to one religion or the organizations of one religion a latitude which you will correctly deny to the organizations of another religion, because there will be competition. If you give it to one, others will also demand it.
The exuberance over fundamental rights attracts another fundamental question. Fundamental rights would have precious little meaning if we are not able to provide the fundamental needs and sustenance of life to all our people, namely food, shelter, and even education and health.
Millions of children today die of malnutrition in this country. India has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. India has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. All the other fundamental rights that we are talking about can have meaning only when these needs are guaranteed. So I would say an year-round, all year-round employment guarantee program for people in general and rural poor women in particular. Literacy and numeracy campaigns on a very large scale, and I would say not just food for work program, but food for literacy campaigns and programs. Then basic needs such as water, fuel, fodder, all these elementary needs and so on and so forth. But I think that this can be done meaningfully, or primary healthcare facilities, which are appallingly lacking in our society, in our country today.
We have to agree upon this thing, that it is everyone's right, and it is already in the Constitution. It is everyone's right to be able to live, which means he must get at least 2 square meals a day. Now, whether it is 20% or 30% or 40% or 50%, anybody can differ with regard to the percentages. But of this there is no doubt that there are a very substantial number of people who do not get 2 square meals a day. So we have the food work program, we have various other things, and whatever it is, it's a whole gamut of things which have to be done, but we got to make sure of it. After all, food, health and education, these are some very basic things.
No constitution can be expected to remain sacrosanct over time. Constitutional reform, therefore, is a continual process of analysis, of introspection, of the adoption of change within a complex and dynamic political, social and economic environment. What are the thrust areas of constitutional reform?
What is important now in constitutional reform is to, especially considering the interpretation of the Supreme Court, is to make the directive principles of state policy enforceable in court. Because there are many areas where the state, though it officially in law and in policy accepts and frames issues and policies in tune with directive principles of state policy, they are not implemented.
So you would, in summing up, say that the letter of the Constitution is very well drafted, but the spirit has been violated often?
I won't say violated so much as not acted upon. You see, violation is something very positive. I would not like to put it that way, but I think it has not been acted upon in the manner it should have been acted upon.
What would be thrust areas of reform?
Greater equality and removal of poverty. These are the 2 basic things.
The task that the Constitution had set itself was gigantic, and therefore, even though the actual achievements may be considerable, they may still appear paltry when juxtaposed with the immensity of the objectives. As for the future, what is required is pessimism of intelligence and optimism of will. Thank you for being with us.